Imagine waking up one day and discovering that it's suddenly October 15th, knowing that yesterday was October 4th. No, you didn't black out or travel through time, at least, not in the sci-fi way. Welcome to the world we live in, where sometimes the calendar skips like a scratched record. Today we're diving into one of history's weirdest glitches, the 10 days that vanished in October 1582. Why did it happen? Who made it happen? And did people just go along with it? And before diving into time, please spend some seconds of yours to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Or risk getting stuck in a time loop where every day is Monday. Your call. Back in the good old days, like the year 45 BCE, Julius Caesar looked at the Roman calendar and probably thought, this is a disaster. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Before Caesar's reform, the Romans were working with a lunar calendar that had completely fallen out of sync with the seasons. It was just 355 days long, which meant it lost about 10 days every year compared to the solar cycle. To try and fix that, they'd occasionally throw in a bonus month, a messy leap month called Mercedonius. Sounds fun, right? Well, here's the catch. Corrupt officials were the ones who decided when to add that month. So if they liked your political career, maybe you got more time in office. If not, tough luck. Suddenly your term just got a month shorter. Over time, this inconsistency became an astronomical train wreck. Festivals meant to celebrate harvests were happening in the middle of winter. Spring could show up in April one year, and June the next. The calendar was no longer a timekeeping tool, it was a political weapon. That's when Caesar decided to reboot the whole thing. He called in an Alexandrian astronomer named Sosigenes, who suggested scrapping the lunar chaos entirely and adopting a solar calendar, like the Egyptians had been doing. The result was the Julian calendar. 365 days a year, with a leap day every 4 years. Clean, predictable, revolutionary. Finally, the months made sense again. Farmers could stop planting in the snow, people actually knew what day it was, and for a moment, time and politics stopped fighting each other. Of course, it still wasn't perfect, but compared to what came before, it was basically timekeeping magic. Fast forward to the 1500s, and the Julian calendar, once Caesar's pride and joy, was about as accurate as a drunk sundial. It had a tiny flaw. It assumed a year was exactly 365.25 days long. But in reality, it's about 365.2422 days. That might not sound like much, but over centuries those decimal crumbs piled up. By the 16th century, the calendar had drifted out of sync with the solar year by roughly 10 days. And that was a big problem, especially for the church. Why? Because of the most important date in Christianity, Easter. Easter is supposed to align with the spring equinox, but thanks to the drift, Easter was slowly creeping earlier and earlier into the year, messing with centuries of religious tradition. The church wasn't just annoyed, they were worried that their most sacred holiday was becoming astronomically inaccurate. Enter Pope Gregory XIII. Not a man who liked being told the stars disagreed with his schedule. In 1582, Gregory had had enough. With the help of astronomers like Aloysius Lilius and Christopher Clavius, he introduced a new system, the Gregorian calendar. It was a slick upgrade. It adjusted the leap year rules to better reflect the actual solar year and yanked the drifting calendar back in line. How? By simply deleting 10 days? Yep. October 4th, 1582 was followed directly by October 15th, 1582. 10 days just gone, like your will to live after opening your work email on a Monday. This calendar exorcism realigned the date of the spring equinox to March 21st, where it was supposed to be, and most importantly, it kept Easter holy, heavenly, and on time. Of course, not everyone jumped on board right away. One day it's October 4th, and then it's suddenly the 15th. Crops didn't care, neither did the weather, but your taxes, your wedding, your death certificate, absolute nightmare. You'd think everyone would be thrilled to have a calendar that actually worked, but no. This is human history we're talking about, where even timekeeping sparks a fight. When Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar, the Protestant world gave him the medieval equivalent of a side-eye. Why? Because they didn't trust the Pope. In the 16th century, Europe was knee-deep in religious tensions. The Protestant Reformation had already fractured the Christian world, and anything that smelled remotely papal was treated with suspicion. To many Protestants, adopting the Pope's calendar felt like admitting he had authority over time itself, and that was a big no. So while Catholic countries like Spain, Portugal, and Italy made the switch overnight, Protestant nations like England and much of Germany said, "Thanks, but we'll keep our broken clock." The result? For more than a century, Europe existed in two different timelines, like a 1600s version of multiverse madness. Scheduling anything across borders became a bureaucratic nightmare. Imagine planning a wedding, only to find out your cousin from London thinks it's still last week. Eventually, practicality won out. England switched in 1752, dropping 11 days by then due to accumulated drift. People literally went to bed on September 2nd and woke up on September 14th. And yes, some folks believed those missing days were stolen from their lives. Riots even broke out in parts of England with people chanting, "Give us our 11 days." Because of course they did. Imagine if you had some holidays booked for those days. I'd be pissed too. So, after centuries of calendar chaos, you'd think humanity had finally gotten its act together. But, nope. We got the days in order, and then decided to mess up the hours. Welcome to the wild world of time zones, where noon might mean lunchtime in one place and pitch black midnight in another. And everyone somehow just agrees to pretend that makes sense. Before the 19th century, time was hyper-local. Noon was simply when the sun was at its highest point in your town. That was fine when the fastest thing moving was a horse. But then came trains, telegraphs, and the realization that not everyone could just wing it with a sundial. So in 1884, at the International Meridian Conference, a bunch of very serious men in very serious suits decided to divide the world into 24 time zones, all based on a single line running through Greenwich, England. Did everyone agree right away? Of course not. Some countries adopted it immediately, others waited. Some split the difference, created half-hour time zones, or changed them later out of spite, politics, or sheer chaos. Hi India with your UTC plus 530, and Nepal, you're at UTC plus 545, just to be extra. Even today, not every country plays by the same timekeeping rules. China, for example, is geographically wide enough to have 5 time zones, but the entire country runs on Beijing time. That means in some western regions the sun rises at 10 a.m. and no one blinks. And then there's daylight saving time, the grand tradition of setting your clock forward, backward, and then forgetting which direction it was last month. Originally introduced to save daylight during wartime and energy crises, it now mostly just causes grumpy mornings and missed appointments. Oh, and fun fact, Russia once decided to abolish daylight saving time entirely in 2011. Then brought it back, then canceled it again. Time is apparently optional in some places. All this to say, even after dropping 10 days and inventing time zones, humans still find ways to make telling time confusing, but at least we can all agree on one thing: New Year's Eve happens at midnight, unless you're a time traveler, and that brings us to something even weirder. So, yes, believe it or not, you can time travel, without needing a DeLorean or a flux capacitor. All you need is a passport, and a plane ticket that crosses the international dateline. Here's how it works. The International Dateline, IDL, is an imaginary zigzagging line in the Pacific Ocean that decides what day it is. Cross it from west to east and you go back in time. Cross it the other way and suddenly you're in tomorrow. Sounds confusing? That's because it is, and wonderfully so. For example, if you celebrate New Year's Eve in Samoa, you could hop on a plane, fly to American Samoa, which is just 35 miles away, and celebrate New Year's again. Yes, 2 New Years in one night. Twice the champagne, twice the regrets. There are even cruise packages that let you ring in the New Year twice, just by sailing across time. It's the closest humanity has gotten to actual temporal sorcery, and it involves buffet dinners and bad karaoke. And let's talk about the extremes. The first country to welcome the new year is Kiribati's Line Islands, UTC plus 14. They get to pop champagne before anyone else on Earth. The last, Baker and Howland Islands, UTC minus 12. These uninhabited specks are technically in yesterday, even when the rest of the world is already in the future. In other words, Earth never experiences a single moment together. At any given time, some part of the world is just waking up while another is already living in tomorrow. It's a beautifully disorganized global symphony. But that's not the only oddity. France has 12 time zones, not because of geography but due to its overseas territories. North Korea once created its own time zone called Pyongyang time, just to be different. They've since changed back, but the point was made. And Antarctica? Scientists just pick whichever time zone makes the most sense, because the sun doesn't really set or rise properly there anyway. So while we obsess over being on time, our clocks are basically a polite social lie we all agree to believe. Time is a human invention, and like all things human, it's occasionally brilliant, frequently absurd, and always slightly off. Believe it or not, the calendar we use today, the good old Gregorian, was far from the only idea on the table. Over the centuries, dozens of proposals tried to reinvent the way we track time. Some were practical, others downright dystopian. Let's start with the French Revolutionary calendar, because if there's one thing the French Revolution loved more than guillotines, it was reorganizing everything. Introduced in 1793, this calendar was designed to wipe the slate clean of religion and monarchy. It had 12 months, each with 30 days. Weeks that were 10 days long, yes, they tried killing the weekend. Days divided into 10 hours, with 100 minutes per hour. Each month had names like Brumaire and Thermidor, based on nature and the seasons. It was poetic and chaotic. Nobody liked having fewer days off, and coordinating with the rest of the world became a logistical nightmare. After 12 years of resistance and confusion, Napoleon pulled the plug. But that didn't stop others from trying. In the early 20th century, companies and scientists pushed for the International Fixed Calendar. This one had 13 months, each with exactly 28 days, and every month started on a Sunday. It was simple, symmetrical, and deeply unsettling. Oh, and the 13th month? It was called Sol, and slotted in between June and July like an awkward bonus level. Even Eastman Kodak, the camera company, adopted the 13-month calendar internally and used it until 1989. Why? Because engineers love neat grids, and Kodak had the money to ignore the rest of the world. Another gem, the world calendar. It kept 12 months, but restructured them so that each year would always start on a Sunday. Holidays like Year Day were added to keep the system aligned with the solar year. Every year would be identical, perfect for planners and utterly soulless for anyone who loves a surprise long weekend. So, why didn't any of these catch on? Well, it turns out that changing how billions of people mark time is harder than solving the calendar's quirks. Religion, tradition, and international synchronization all stood in the way. And then there's the sheer stubbornness of humanity. We'll accept daylight saving time, barely, but ask us to add a 13th month and we riot. Ultimately, the Gregorian calendar survived not because it's perfect, but because it's just good enough to be tolerable and old enough that no one wants to fight over it again. But hey, imagine telling someone your birthday is on Sol 14. You'd sound like you were born in a sci-fi novel. But wait, weirder still, February 30th has existed. It showed up briefly in the Soviet Union in 1930 and 1931 when they tried to overhaul the calendar with a 5-day work week. Because apparently what the workers really needed was to forget which day it was. Another curiosity? There's a small town in Indiana that changed time zones 7 times in 15 years. So depending on when you lived there, lunch might have happened at 11, 12, or 1, even if you never moved houses. And if that's not confusing enough, let's talk about leap seconds. Tiny corrections added occasionally to account for Earth's wobbly rotation. They can literally cause bugs in computer systems, shut down websites, and even temporarily mess with GPS signals. Yes, 1 second can ruin your day, especially if you're a server admin. All of this, the leap years, the deleted days, the artificial borders in time, just goes to show. Our idea of time is part science, part bureaucracy, and part cosmic comedy. So, to recap, we've explored a world where 10 days vanished, Easter nearly went off schedule, popes and Protestants fought over the meaning of March, and entire countries literally skipped days just to improve their Google Calendar compatibility. From Julius Caesar's solar math to Pope Gregory's holy edit, from riots over missing days to companies inventing 13-month timelines, time isn't just something we live in, it's something we manage, bend, and occasionally delete when it gets inconvenient. And the next time you glance at your phone and trust that it's Monday, July 21st, 2025, just remember, that's not cosmic truth, it's a compromise between emperors, scientists, and people who really didn't want to be late for Easter dinner. So if you want to learn more about odd curiosities, like and subscribe, or you might wake up tomorrow and find out it's last week again, and again, and again. Timekeeping was supposed to bring order to chaos, yet somehow chaos always seems to stay one step ahead. That's the world we live in.